Thank you for joining. We'll get started shortly. We have a couple minutes for everybody to get in. We'll probably start a minute after the hour. Again, just letting everybody get in and get settled as we get settled as ourselves. If you want to take a moment, drop in chat where you're calling from, that would be great. And kind of take the poll of where everybody's calling from. We kind of use that as ideas to where maybe we can do some of these events live or even do some workshops around those locations, some of the in-person workshops. We got somebody up in your area, Rich, up in New York.
Let's see, where is that? Q&A is not loading for me. Did we not get questions going again?
Yeah, it's there.
Huh. I don't know what's going on Rich's screen today. That's fun.
All right. Well, are you ready to go ahead and kick this off and we can get started? And as people continue to join, we can catch them up afterwards.
Definitely. All righty. So thank you everybody for hopping in today again. We're excited to be here for our second session of Uncorking ITAM Excellence. Again, I'm Rich Cheek, located in the New York area. I specialize in our asset products here on the ServiceNow platform, coming to you with a background as a practitioner, did some asset management for a university. After that, I went to a few different partners where I helped to implement the platform. And now I'm here helping our customers realize the value of asset management on our platform. And Michelle is with us as well.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Campos. I'm an ITAM solution consultant, very similar to what Rich does, in helping customers understand the value of asset management and why it's so important to do it on a platform such as ServiceNow. I also came from a customer. I've been a practitioner for a long time, managing both software and hardware asset analysts for a bank. So this topic today is really near and dear to my heart. Looking forward to the discussion. So Rich, if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So again, hello, that's us. But today we're just going to go over real quick. We're hosting this webinar series, hopefully to drive engagement in the community, to get folks adopting the platform, taking advantage of things they might not have thought of before, and thinking creatively around asset management here. Today we're going to be focusing in on, is this the out? No. We're going to be focusing in on actually regulations throughout the ServiceNow platform. So how we can start to utilize ServiceNow as a means to defend our companies when the auditors come knocking, when the regulators come knocking, and using the data in the platform to help ensure that compliance. So, as we're diving through here, drop your questions in the chat. We're going to be happy to jump in and answer them. Again, this is kind of that registration code. Please sign up. Again, we're doing this the last Tuesday of every month, right, Michelle?
Yeah, it's kind of shifting.
Yeah. Knowledge kind of threw us off a little bit with this, but I believe we've landed on those dates. And with that said, let's kind of get rolling here and tackle the bear in the room. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michelle.
Yeah.
We're supposed to drink wine. That's the whole point. I missed that whole point of the series.
I was about to miss it too. So, all right, you want to talk about yours first, and then I can go second.
Definitely, yeah. So, to kind of just keep with the theme of the webinar series, we stole this from our colleagues who do this and drink some beer. So, managing assets it's fancy, and we drink wine because that's a good excuse. But anyway, I live in the Long Island area of New York. A couple of weeks back, I was taking my daughter home from New Hampshire, and we took the ferries across from the eastern end. There was a bunch of wineries along the way, so I stopped in at a local favorite, Palmanock Winery, and asked them what they recommend for a bottle of red. So I have a Cabernet Franc here from 2021. I haven't tried it yet, but I think last time we were instructed to sniff, swirl, and sip. So swirl. And it's a good bottle of wine, I guess. Something I would definitely see myself drinking with an Italian dinner, I think. So with that said, Michelle, what are you drinking today?
Yeah. So I kind of stayed with the theme. Last time we asked some of our customers, what some suggestions, and Tim made a suggestion. It's Fiesta Winery, and he said a sweet wine, sweet red. And so I found this. It's called Home Sweet Home from Fiesta Wineries, which is kind of in the hill country. I am not a huge red drinker, so this will be my first experience with red in a very long time. I tend to kind of go with the white wine, but let's go ahead and try this out real quick. I put mine in a baby sippy cup because I make a mess. I'm liable to like spill this all over my floor, all over my white rug. So a white wine would not be fun to try and get out of a white rug. It is good. I would say it's probably one of the best red wines I've tried. Definitely a lot sweeter, not as strong. So with that said, I do want to go ahead and start a poll real quick and get some more suggestions on what's some wine that you would suggest us kind of trying out. So if you could take a few minutes and give us some options. We're always looking for a different wine. There was another wine that I tried, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, that somebody else suggested, and I tried it in the evening time with my husband, and we actually went through the whole bottle pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, suggestions are the best part about this. I should probably take your lead too there, Michelle. I have a new carpet in my office, and red wine would not look so great on it. So I should get those fancy sippy cups on my wall.
Well, I just don't want to be that person that's trying to get red wine out of carpet. It's from my understanding, it's probably not very fun. So it's already bad enough that I have to deal with dogs in my carpet. So. I have a black dog with white carpet. Never makes it fun. So.
Yeah, and a Roomba won't do so well with wine, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. All right, so I'm gonna give it maybe another 10 seconds. We got a few that have added some different wines, so we appreciate that. And I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll, and we'll take those suggestions for next time. Thank you, guys. So let's kind of get in.
Go ahead.
There you go. Let's kind of get in real quick and into the meat of everything, right? So the reason we're here today, and the reason we're here today is really to talk about regulations, talk about how ServiceNow can help within environments that are highly regulatory. I went out, I did some searching, I put together this slide really quickly on different areas that asset management can fall within a regulatory compliance stance, right? So these are some of those people, some of those departments that are pushing the regulatory compliance. Some of them are the actual compliance themselves, but really defining, what we need to do around assets to make sure that you're compliant with those regulatory stamps. If you want to go ahead and move on, Rich. So when we talk about regulatory findings, I'm going to stay kind of high level on this, and I'm going to move through it kind of quickly because I'm assuming that most of the people here are here because of the fact that they're having to meet these compliance. So that you might be more of an expert than we are, but I want to talk about it in reference to some of the customers that we're talking to on a daily basis, as well as my practitioner experience coming from a bank, right? So when you're talking about regulatory findings, a lot of it is really just gaps in processes or gaps in inventory in this case, right? Gaps in how you're maintaining the inventory or maintaining the data that resides on that inventory when we're talking about asset management. And a finding can be anything that a regulatory body has gone out and found a risk or a gap in that compliance. So if you look at the cause, if not identified, the board is ultimately they're going to notify the board. The board has to take actions on whatever that risk or that gap was identified. And then we have to make a commitment as, and I say we as if I'm still in my practitioner days, but, as a body that is in, if you're talking about financial, or if you're talking about HIPAA, or talking about anybody that has this sensitive data we need to make sure that ultimately we're doing everything we can to remediate any risk that has been identified and put processes in place to make sure that those risks don't continue to pop up. So when we're gonna, if you want to skip up to the next one, Rich. So where we're going to talk about more in depth is how ServiceNow can help you meet those, right? So when you are talking about asset management as a whole, you're talking about process and procedure, right? And that's going to be something that our customers ultimately need to define and what they need to meet on their end, right? But where the tool is going to come in and help is we're going to help with making sure that you're maintaining the inventory, that the inventory is live and accurate. We're going to help you with workflows. You'll see as we go through a demonstration later today, how a workflow can help you show that you're meeting compliance and is the auditable record for you if you need evidence of showing how you got from point A to point B. So we're going to be able to put that information together. A lot of times you'll hear asset management spans across a lot of different departments within a company. And so what you'll see here is we're not just looking at asset management, but there's vulnerability associated to that. So is there, do you have vulnerability management in the tool to make it even better and more mature within the stance? Are you do you have risk associated with it? Are you identifying where you have gaps in your risk? So asset management is a piece of this puzzle. But as you grow and build out your asset management, you'll see that it starts flowing into other different departments. And ultimately, the more you have built out on the platform, the better visibility you have across the enterprise. If you want to move on. For some reason, my throat is decided to dry up on me now. And I'm going to use that as an excuse to drink a sip of wine. So to continue on with that theme, right? When we're talking about asset management, we talk about the HAM and SAM and the SaaS reclaiming. A lot of times that can go really financially heavy, but it's also inventory heavy. You want to make sure that you have the full inventory. But how are you getting that inventory? And the last thing you want to do is do manual imports, right? And every now and then you might need to do one when you're buying stuff. But things that are on the network, you might want to use ITAM discovery, or use service graph connectors through ITAM to bring those assets in automatically. Tracking at incidences, has an asset been broken? Was it ran over by a car? And how is that associated and lines up with the life cycle of the actual asset? Talked about vulnerability management, SPM, talking about technology portfolio management, identifying end of life things and taking those and moving those to a project, get off of those assets, to get off the old asset and get the new asset in place so that work can continue on. And of course, risk, right? So identifying risk around any of those assets, those applications that you're talking about, and how to mitigate that risk. This is kind of that end-to-end technology for asset management when we talk about it. Go ahead. And then key components. What makes a successful regulatory audit, right? So again, going with the theme that I'm talking about, it's not just asset management. You're not just living in that siloed little box of an asset manager. It was funny, whenever I was hired about 10 years ago to do asset management, I was asked if I wanted to live in the dungeon to do asset management, because that's where they saw it, right? Before, it used to be just a very small financial component that rolled up to maybe a financial assistant of some sort, right? And it was just all financially focused. As I've seen it grow over time, and I'm sure Rich, you've seen too, it's become a lot more security focused. There's still that financial aspect. There will always be that piece, but really, how are you able to secure your environment if you don't know what assets reside in them, right? That's kind of my take on it. What have you seen, Rich? I was going to say,
it's funny that you say in the dungeon, because when I was working for the university, our office very well felt like a dungeon. It was in the basement, surrounded by stacks and stacks of computers and monitors. But yeah, the idea around the security piece of an asset has changed quite a bit, I think, just in the technology landscape. from the physical security of the device, who can get to it, right? Social engineering seems to be one of the leading causes of breaches. So, just taking overview of that holistic risk of what an asset is, from, what's the cost if it goes down, to what's the cost if there's a security breach on it. But just that accurate inventory of everything, the level of detail and granularity that's expected of folks responsible for those assets has only just been growing and growing over the last handful of years, right?
Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of emphasize the idea of bringing all of these other departments in together when you are looking at standing up an asset management program, or you're looking to mature it or ultimately redesign it, right? Because asset management will grow over time. It's not a one and done kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But having these stakeholders at the table and helping you to define the process is only going to help you get to the next level. If you change it and you go with that siloed of I live in the dungeon and nobody likes me kind of mentality, you'll never grow. You'll never get to the next level. So within the bank, we actually had a committee that came together. It was a security committee to evaluate security things that were going on in the environment, outside of our environment, in the world. And asset management lived in that space, right? So we had a seat at the table. We came and we talked about things that were going end of life into support. We talked about projects that were ultimately designed to replace those items. We had that seat at the table, and it was really important because whenever I needed my security team to help me deliver a message, they stood behind me because they understood what was going on in my environment, and they had that buy-in up front. So just keep that in mind. It's always good to have a committee and talking to that committee on a regular basis. Okay, so you want to go to the next one? I think this is the last slide, and then we'll start getting into the specifics around software and hardware and how we can really design it towards a regulatory stance specifically. But these are some of the examples that we're able to find out there. Avoiding regulatory findings, right? Those fines that are penalties that have been set upon you based on those gaps in processes that are broken or missing. I have an example of one specifically that touched me near and dear to my heart as I was an asset manager. Reducing costs, how are you making sure that you're improving productivity, streamlining remediation process, workflows? All of these kind of go hand in hand, and they're going to help drive savings as well as keeping you in business, keeping those lights on, making sure that you're able to continue doing business as usual because of being able to satisfy any findings or getting ahead of any findings before they're even found, right? So let's go ahead and move to the next one.
I think that last point, I think that last point is the driver that a lot of companies are working towards, right? Stopping the problems before they occur.
Stop the bleeding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or like
before it starts.
Yeah, put on knee pads and elbow pads or something before you fall, right? But I think like internal audit teams, right? Maybe you aren't subject to some of the strict financial regulations, but you do have your own internal audits because you manage a large cost of assets, right? It's an expensive proposition for your business. There's no reason that we can't draw parallels to that as well. So just as we're looking through the lens of all of these regulations, it's not necessarily one specific one we're talking towards, but just that idea of knowing what you have, using what you own, and mitigating the risk against it, across all of these different areas of the platform.
100%. Can't say it any better.
So yeah, hopping into a specific regulation and what that might look like, and branching out from there, right? We're going to kind of kick off with this FFIEC regulation, and I think Michelle is cringing as I say those letters because it may have haunted her in a past life. But
yeah, for sure. So as Rich said, we don't want to really drill into a specific one, but I'm using this one as an example only because I did get shivers when he brought this up, right? This is something that I'm familiar with. It's something that I've done. It's something that I'm having conversations with all, our customers on a daily basis in the financial industry. But this is just an example. And what you'll notice is whether it's ISO, whether it's SOX, whether it's FFIEC, you know, all the different all the different regulatory defined, you know, I'm lost my words. I think I've had too much wine already. But when you're looking to meet these regulatory requirements, a lot of them you'll see a lot of overlap, right? So being able to identify that they kind of look and feel the same. So we're going to use this as an example, just so that we can show you how it ties into the overall stance within the platform. So today I'm going to take hardware. So we're going to flip it around a little bit. Rich is going to take software. I'm going to take hardware, and I'm going to stay focused on the asset end of life, and we're going to talk through that portion of it. If you've looked at the very top portion, it talks about process and procedures. You definitely want to make sure you have defined process and procedures. A lot of times I'll talk to customers and they'll say that there's gaps, or they're weak, right? That they want to strengthen those processes and procedures. And I always tell them, look at some of the out-of-the-box workflows that we have within ServiceNow, because those can be processes and procedures you adopt instead of going out and redefining them, right? No, we need to rewrite the book if you have them at your hands and ultimately can use them. The other thing I want to talk about assets and talk about processes and procedures, and I might show this in the demonstration, is the way that we manage our processes and procedures is we define those as knowledge articles, and we ultimately had those stored within our knowledge bank, and in the employee service center, employees could go and identify what that process was. So for example, if they're disposing of an asset, they were able to go in and type a search word of dispose, and then they can see what that process is. They can see ultimately what they need to do in order to, maybe dispose of an asset. But that's one way of doing it. And then when we talk about technology, asset inventory, hardware, and software, we're going to kind of table that for next month, not next week, but for next month, we're going to talk about how we can automate that, and we'll give you some more details on that here in the near future.
Yeah, so actually, if I could just jump in real quick, we did have a question in the chat from Steve about how do we know you have everything in your CMDB? That session is going to be extremely helpful in coming up with the ideas around how we're discovering all of our assets, hardware, and software across there. I think to dive in as well, there may be some other areas of the platform that can help, but I think this is where the whole idea around enterprise architecture starts to come into play, and looking at how you're capturing your whole footprint and then ensuring those types of integrations are brought into a tool like ServiceNow. So we could tout that we have the solutions to do on the platform with something like APM and application portfolio management for that, and all of our different CMDB health pieces. So happy to keep diving into this a little bit more towards the end of the call today, but I did just want to address it before we got too far along. And then I believe the next webinar series, very timely, is going to help address, answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah, this is a question that we saw, and a topic that we saw come up a couple times on our suggestions whenever last month, right? And so this would definitely be a session. So it was kind of part A to the part B. And so our next session will be kind of talking about inventory and how to automate that. So good talk. Okay, you want to go to the next session?
Sure.
Our next slide.
Yep.
Okay, so different workflows. We have different workflows depending on, what you're looking to do. This is just an example of what a workflow looks like. And I'm going to go kind of run through one. It's not going to be the donation. It's going to be a disposal workflow. But again, just keeping in mind, any workflows that we have out there that are out of the box workflows are something that you can audit against. And I'll show you how we can pull up the flow around those assets. And if you were needing to give evidence out to your regulatory, to your auditor, right? You can ultimately export that information and show that, and we'll show that in the demonstration. You can go to the next one.
Yep. And then next up, so
okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna jump through.
Save the surprise. We're gonna escape from that. Stop the share for a moment. Michelle is gonna steal the screen and take it away.
Share real quick. Can you confirm you can see my?
Yep.
Okay. Also, just real quick, this is the FFIEC guidelines that I was talking about. So I'll just kind of throw this in the chat just for anybody that's interested in kind of looking that up. This goes into a lot more depth. I just had it kind of at a summary, but we are going to take a look at addressing IT end of life. So with software asset management, or excuse me, with hardware asset management and software asset management, you get what's called the content service. It's made up of an in-house research team along with a content library. The research team is going out and identifying when publishers and manufacturers have identified their hardware or software as being end of life, end of support, end of extended support. And then once they've identified that, they upload it to the content library. The content library then feeds it into your instance on a weekly basis. There's no manual import or export. You're not having to go out and identify this information on your own. And then we provide it to you in a report format. So this is one way to ultimately view that. If I wanted to go into a specific life cycle, I could do that. So I'm going to go ahead and drill into end of support just to show you kind of what this report looks like. If I wanted to export all of this information, I can do that into a report, but we're going to take this a step further. I'm going to go into something that I'm looking for that should be already out of our environment. So we're going to take a look at these two ThinkPads, and we're going to identify ultimately what assets reside up to that end of support. So you can see here, we have a couple that have been disposed of, but we have a couple that are pending disposal. So those are ready to go. It looks like they're at my Santa Monica warehouse. So we're going to work with that. But we're also going to go ahead and take a look at our ThinkPads and see where they're at in their life cycle. So again, I have, it looks like 3 that are pending disposal. I have some that are retired. So that's just one level of being able to see ultimately what's in your environment and is it end of life, end of support, looking at where it's at, is it being used, or is it, sitting on a shelf somewhere that you can ultimately retire it. But this is one way of being able to identify that end of life, end of support. If you come and ultimately want to go to the table and do a more detailed report, you can also do that. So let's get this. So if I go to the table view, and just in case somebody out there wasn't aware, if you type .list in all caps after the table name, it'll automatically open up a new tab for you. So no need to.
Yep, it's got to be capitalized. It goes to a new tab.
Yeah, something I recently learned. So should have known it a long time ago.
There's a couple of those quick ones. You can do .form, and that will bring up a blank form, or .config, and that'll bring you to. You have to have your admin hat on for that one, but that'll bring you to your table configuration. So I'll take my old software ServiceNow developer hat off, and we can keep going here.
I love it. So the beauty of having Rich on this call is he's been in the platform holistically. So I've been really focused on asset and the practitioner side of asset management, whereas he's been an implementer and really been all around the platform. So I love having him on and kind of talking about some of the cheat sheets, things that we can do.
Yeah, one of the reasons I love the ham solution so much is I guess I cut my teeth developing on the ServiceNow platform in like 2013, 14 to build a lot of those things. And ServiceNow loves to hear from customers about what they wish they could solve for on the platform. So it was folks that were in my seat that were screaming from the mountains that they want to be able to audit a location because they have a ton of stock rooms that they need to go check out, that, ultimately it gets delivered in a more sustainable, scalable way by ServiceNow. So I love all that kind of stuff, though.
It's true. We do love to hear it. So our product team has regular meetings with us, right? The ITAM SEs that are kind of hitting the ground running, that are forefront in the customers' conversations. And so they'll reach out to us to understand ideas, but then they also leverage the idea portal. So I'm not sure who's familiar with it. Maybe Rich, if you want to drop that in the chat, if you can find the link, but anybody can go out there and identify ideas. So if there's like a workflow that you're kind of thinking of that maybe isn't out of the box, definitely take time and go through and drop that into the idea portal, because that's something that they look at on a regular basis and kind of prioritize depending on how many requests that are coming in and where it is within the roadmap.
And I will say it is tricky to find that link, because Googling ServiceNow idea portal brings you to our product with an idea portal. So I'll get the link out in the chat here shortly.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Yeah.
No, it's all good.
All right. So we've identified that we do have some stock and we do have some items that are in stock pending disposal, but they are end of life, right? So they went end of life, or they're going end of life as of July 26, 2024. We can see that it's a publisher end of life. So that is whenever it comes through from ServiceNow or publisher, that's saying that it's published out there and it's identified out in, through the publisher's portal or their website. You do have the ability to come in here and identify your own life cycle. So if for some reason a manufacturer hasn't identified a life cycle, you can come in here and create one yourself. Or maybe you want to be a little more strenuous in making sure that your assets don't go end of life, and so you want to set this for 6 months or a year in advance. You can do that as well, and they will also come out on that report. So whenever you're looking at things, I don't know if I have any specifically in here, I don't, but if it was internal, that's how it would show as internal. Oh yeah, right here, publisher internal. So we went ahead and identified them ourselves. So now let's run over to a disposal order. For sake of time, I've gone ahead and created one, but if we were wanting to start one from new, we would come into the disposal order, click the stock room, identify the location of where the disposal is going to be picked up from, assign it to someone, and identify who our vendor is. Again, just for sake of time, I've gone through and typed in all of that information. I've also picked my assets. So you can see here, I have those Lenovo's. I have an Apple MacBook that was already identified as pending disposal at this location. So I'm going to go ahead and dispose of all of these assets at one time. For anyone that's not familiar with a workflow is really trying to make sure that the work flows from individual to individual or from group to group if there's multiple groups working on it. It also gives you the ability for anybody to pick up that workflow and know where it stopped. So in this case, we can see that this workflow has been started, but it's at that point of verifying the asset. So if Casey, that it's assigned to, went on leave, maybe a medical leave for an extended amount of time, if Sam came in here and needed to work on this, ultimately they could. So we're going to walk through the disposal workflow really quickly, even though this would take months on end. We're going to kind of go through this lightning speed. But you can see, again, these planned assets. I want to go ahead and verify that they are the planned assets. This can be done multiple ways. Probably the easiest way for somebody that's out in the field to verify that an asset is ready to leave, especially if it's like sitting on a shelf or sitting in a box or in a pallet, is to use the mobile app to scan these assets. So the mobile app can be installed on an Android or iOS device, and it can be scanned. You use the camera on that device to scan in the barcode and serial number. But in this case, I'm not going to jump into my mobile app. Just going to go ahead and verify these, and I'm going to come back into the details, and I'm going to go ahead and close this task. Now it's going to automatically open up the next task, and maybe this task could be routed to somebody in the warehouse. Maybe these would be different. In this case, we're going to keep moving on with Casey working on it. She's going to schedule a pickup. We're going to go ahead and say Iron Mountain's picking it up. We're going to say Iron Mountain's picking it up today. The vendor ID, we'll just do a number real quick, and Mike Smith is going to be the pickup. All of these details can be ultimately entered if you want to. I highly recommend entering as much details as you can. It always helps save you in the end when you have them. We're going to go ahead and close this task. Next one is going to be selecting the assets. So again, keeping in mind, I'm doing this within seconds and minutes. Usually these are happening over multiple days, if not weeks at a time. So now we just need to make sure that Mike Smith showed up to pick up these assets. We ultimately want to ensure that these are the assets that are leaving. So again, it's going to have you verify the assets. If there was a discrepancy between the planned assets and the assets ready to leave, you would get a notification, and it's going to prevent you from moving forward without ultimately remediating that. So making sure that your checks and balances are in place. So we're going to go ahead and show these as depart. What you'll also notice is as we're doing that, these states and substates are automatically updating. So I don't have to go into each one of these with every transition that it's moving to go in and update. So before it was in stock pending disposal, now it's in transit because the technician that came on site from Iron Mountain ultimately has these assets now and is ready to leave. So we're going to go ahead and close this task. We're going to move, we got 2 more workflows or 2 more tasks that are going to be associated with this. This one is a confirmation from a vendor. So if you needed to attach any kind of Excel document or email saying that they ultimately picked up the assets, you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to just attach the confirmation to the last one. So in most cases, confirmation, once the vendor leaves your site, usually can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to actually get that back. Before, this would be sticky notes or email reminders or calendars that you put on your Outlook to remember to get this certificate of disposal, and then ultimately on your to-do list, right? But in this case, there's reminders that are going to be out there. There's reports that are going to be showing you that you need to make sure you get this disposal documentation back. So we're going to go ahead and receive the certificate of disposal. We're going to attach that certificate real quick. And then we're going to upload it here. We're going to save this. We're going to show that these assets have now been disposed of. So again, the state changed to retire, disposed of, and we're going to close this task. Now all tasks have been completed. And if I was to go back into this last task, if I go to one of these assets, I'm going to pick a random one, and I scroll down, what you'll notice here is there's a disposal portion of the asset table. This disposal is now associated to that disposal number that we just closed out. It shows me who the vendor is that picked it up, any disposal order number that you want to associate it to. It also shows me when it was disposed of and a retirement date. So now it's all been closed out. Then I could always, if I was to come into the asset instead of going through, so in this case, we went through the disposal workflow, but if I was to come in reverse and come in through the asset, I can very easily get to the workflow and get to my certificate of disposal. So I can see all 6 assets that were disposed of and the certificate of disposal that would be tied to them. So the chain of custody has been completed, right? So you have ultimately made sure that you secured your assets and that they ultimately followed a specific workflow to be disposed of. Keep in mind the workflow that I showed you, these 4 or 5 tasks can ultimately be designed how if you have a process that's working today and you don't need us to define a process for you, you can tweak this by going into Flow Designer. And I'm going to show you real quick what Flow Designer looks like. Flow Designer is our kind of our automation and creating the workflows as they go through. I'm going to look up this one specifically. We are going to find it. I should have probably favorited it real quick, but let's see. I think I have the specific name. Okay. Helps when you look at the right name to narrow it down. So this is our disposal flow. This is exactly what we just walked through. This was a flow that, again, was out of the box. I didn't have to go in there and build this. This is coming to you out of the box with TAM Pro, but it ultimately defines how tasks are being done. If something is completed, when it moves to the next stage ultimately. But if we wanted to come in here and actually see the one that I just executed, maybe I need to show evidence to an auditor, I can come into the executed. So I kind of did that fast. I come over to this 3 dots, I go to execution, and it's going to show me all the items that have been executed around this asset workflow. And then if I was to come in and find the one that I specifically worked on, which I think is this one. I can see here all the specific tasks that happened. I can see everything completed, but I can come into this current record, and now it's going to give me that certificate of disposal along with the disposal information. It's going to show me all of my assets that were disposed of and all of the tasks that were taken. This is a very clean way of providing this information to the auditor. They need to see what process you've done, showing that it matches up with your internal processes that you published, and what assets are associated with that process. You can come in here and ultimately export this information to PDF or XML, and then there's your evidence that you can give to your auditor. So this is just one way of being able to take end of life, end of support items that you found through a report, identify those ones that need to be removed out of your environment, go through a disposal workflow process, and then have evidence that you can show on a regular basis or as needed that ultimately it went through this specific workflow. This is what happened, and provide that to the auditor. And as I said earlier, when we go and you're talking about having policies and procedures published out there, again, what I used as a practitioner was knowledge articles. So here I would have my hardware asset disposal policy. It's published out there where anybody can go in and see it. So I'm meeting that regulatory environment. I'm meeting that specific about policy standards and procedures. I'm meeting that. And I have it here where anybody can go in and see it. And then I could print this out for the auditor as well to show that my workflow met this policy. So kind of tying all the ends together. No, I gave a lot out there. I just wanted to kind of take it past just end of life, end of support, because identifying end of life, end of support is not the holistic. If you went in here to end of life, end of support, they're going to tell you exactly what you need to do. And it's not just identifying it, but it's taking measures to get off of those. It's making sure that you're mitigating the risk. So how are we doing that? Now we're getting those assets out of our environment. We're ultimately making sure that they are disposed of properly, and then we have a tracking and auditable record of how it got out of our environment along with the certificate. So that's just one way of being able to do that. Rich, were there any questions out there?
No, there was a question about the recording of this and the deck going out, which yes, we send them out as follow-ups after the webinar series. Just got to get them up to YouTube. But I think just all of these regulations, the process is more important than the point in time data almost, right? If we're using a spreadsheet to track these, they're not gonna, it's hard to stand on our legs and say, we followed our procedure, our process that you approved, right? What next?
It becomes emails, right? So you're usually in that case, you're trying to dig through your emails to say, hey, I gave finance these records back on this date, or I disposed of it through this email, through this vendor. It becomes very hard, and sometimes people use SharePoint, right, to store some of this information, and that's okay, but it's not great, right? It's not going to get you to the next level of asset management. It's not going to get your business to the next level of growing if you're not making sure that you have a holistic inventory.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we at the university, I mean, we got a phone call at our help desk one day. Somebody had found a printer at a landfill in Michigan with our asset tag on it. And luckily it wasn't an auditor calling us saying, why is this in a landfill? Right? Like what? Yeah. So, but we used it as a thought exercise to go out and try to find what happened to it. Right. Because it was a good exercise to go and try to track that down. And luckily we were able to find the piece of paper stuffed in someone's desk with the certificate of disposal from the vendor we went through with that asset tag. But, it's very tricky sometimes to track that down without it all recorded in one place. So in that instance, it wasn't an auditor. We got lucky. We found it anyway, but it really opened our eyes to saying we have to nail this down a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, and to give an example of an auditor, right? There was a really large bank, I won't say names, but a really large bank that was penalized for $60 million they were penalized because of servers that had ended up, I don't think that was a landfill. I think they ended up in the wrong hands, and there was no documentation showing, they couldn't produce any documentation showing that ultimately it had been wiped and secured and then ultimately disposed of properly. So they had a huge fine, not only a huge fine, but reputation, right? Now their reputation's out there. Customers don't feel comfortable using the bank. So there's a lot going on around it whenever and then all the resources that go into that, right? So it's not just asset management. You got legal now, you got in most cases, your C-levels are involved in it, especially if it goes to that kind of level, right? It's a mad scramble. So the point of this is get ahead of it before it happens. Again, stop the bleeding before you even get there, right? Put those knee pads on and those elbow pads. I'm going to steal that one from you, Rich.
Yeah, my daughter is always asking for them before she goes on her scooter. So it's just front of
I don't
mind.
know what we did in my day. I'm going to be
either.
that person.
Yeah.
I just bled out everywhere. So. All right, I'm going to turn it over. I think Rich,
Yep.
we're going to move
Yeah.
on to software. All right.
I got it. All right. So just again, to address an idea of where this can help stand up to regulations and audits, we saw, let me just jump back a slide here. That final bullet that we were going to tackle here was shadow IT, mitigating risks against things we don't know about. So to the question earlier, this may not answer it exactly, but it kind of plays to that theme about full visibility, across your technology enterprise. Because ultimately, if somebody works for your organization and they're going out and buying something or utilizing a piece of software, it's the organization's responsibility to know about it. So we do have some solutions for that on the ServiceNow platform, specifically around shadow IT and tracking that software spend that we don't know about. So we do have software spend detection, and it's a means to consume all of the financial data at your organization. So those general ledger accounts, maybe people going out and purchasing things on P cards, bringing them into the ServiceNow platform, again, utilizing that content service. So what Michelle was talking about earlier in terms of end of life, end of support, there's a content service that is used to normalize those financial transactions. So it takes those purchase order strings and looks for keywords and differentiators to bring in that this is a piece of software indeed, where you could then go take action on it, right? You may be discovering spend that is out there. So, why is marketing going out and buying their own Dropbox subscriptions to store their data? They should be using the company's, OneDrive subscriptions or whatever that might be, or even looking at overlapping software. So again, that same idea of using software that's not within the processes or approved by the organization, you could really help to detect on this. And then just diving into the platform here quickly to show what that might look like. So again, there's a module here for software spend detection. It's got some functionality built into it, but essentially it's an interactive dashboard where you could come to make sense of that information. So at this point, in my fictional company, we have already either integrated with a third-party tool that stores that financial information. Totally possible to integrate anything into the ServiceNow platform. We point the data in the right place, or we do give you some easy templates to import. So you could come in here, download a template, just like importing data anywhere else in the ServiceNow platform, align your columns to your other systems, and bring that data into the platform. From there, we have a few different views we get. So we can see all the different publishers that are being recognized by that content service against the purchases and the products underneath them. As we start to dig in a little further, where we could start to see things that are unmanaged, right? So in ServiceNow's eyes here, anything that's unmanaged is something that we're not tracking entitlements for. So if you are familiar, I think we spoke about it the last webinar series, an entitlement is a record that gets entered into ServiceNow to tell us what you purchased as an organization. So as an example, an entitlement might be 50 licenses for Microsoft Project that aligns to the software model. So anything that you're seeing here is unmanaged with this checkbox are things that, IT or whoever is doing your software asset management practice is not tracking to. You get to see the costs associated with them, along with all the data that makes it up. So I think the most common way that I hear about folks wanting to track towards this is cost centers, who's actually go out and buying it. So you could go in and group this by your cost centers. So you could track down those folks who are, always on the naughty list and not following process and address issues there and all of the different transactions against that. You could break it down by department or location, a few different ways to slice and dice that data. So when we're talking the ideas, software spend detection, I think it's relatively straightforward here, but it's extremely powerful to be able to stand up to an auditor and say, no, we're doing our due diligence. We're consuming our financial transactions to see what's going on outside of central IT.
And it helps define gaps in your processes, right? By seeing this, it helps you understand who those rule breakers are. It helps bring it back in. It's not an easy button that says, okay, now I want to manage all this, and this magic happens on behalf of anybody. But this starts having conversations. You start looking at your processes, defining, how you can secure them better. But then you also start knowing who you need to go and talk to, and start talking, kind of do that hand slap of, hey, shame on you, don't do this. This is the process you need to follow, and then start bringing it into management. But like Rich said, this is showing that you're going above and beyond just managing what you know about, but now I'm starting to manage things that you weren't aware of, that people might be using P cards and buying stuff that you're just unaware of. So,
definitely.
Good point.
And then just to kind of round us out today here, I'm going to dive back into a slide because this last piece of functionality is at the bleeding edge of ServiceNow technology. And it's kind of exciting, I think. So one of the biggest gaps today is SaaS activity. So maybe folks aren't buying software on a P card, but they're accessing websites and functionality that you're not aware of. So I think a lot of organizations have nailed down a pretty tight policy on installing software on devices. So even if someone were to go out and purchase Microsoft Project or any other software that might be out there, maybe not that one, but a piece of software and try to install it, they're going to get flagged. Things are going to pop up. Bells and alarms are going to go off from your security teams. Organizations are getting a handle around SaaS, but a lot of places still have it relatively open. So people go access any websites and software that they like out there. So new to Washington, D.C. is a browser plugin that we support to go and do the discovery of SaaS out at your organization. It is a better together story between ITAM, IT Operations Management, and ITAM. So it runs, the DEX plugin, the digital experience plugin, is part of our Agent Client Collector, our ACC. So as we're going to keep throwing around acronyms, we'll follow up with this after this call and we could talk more towards it. But essentially, it's a piece of our ServiceNow discovery that gets pushed out to your web browsers to track the different URLs that folks are accessing. From there, again, it kind of goes through that content library and normalizes that data. So it'll start to recognize what folks are doing on Figma or Monday.com. It's going to flag whether or not it is managed. So that same idea around, do we have entitlements and purchases of it? How many folks are going out to access it? And even to the point of total access time and last time used. So it's just more extension of that functionality to say, what are we unaware of that's out there at our organizations? And I think that segues pretty nicely into our final slide here and the idea of ITOM and ITAM better together. But we said it earlier, our next series at the end of the month is going to be around how ITOM helps enhance asset management on the ServiceNow platform. So from the lens of discovering software, discovering hardware, and tracking what's up and operational in your environments. But that's where we'll be going next with it.
Yeah, we're going to have a special guest. So we should have Will from Beers with Engineers, so kind of our counterpart on the ITOM side. He's going to come in and we're going to really talk about, how is that inventory accurate? How are you making sure, kind of back to that question, how are you making sure that you have your whole inventory identified within the platform? So I'm really looking forward to that session.
And finally, just one last teaser for knowledge for the folks that are going next week. We're excited to see you there. I will be out there somewhere on the expo floor. Try to find me and say hello. I'm still waiting for my official schedule, but it's the biggest event of the year in the ServiceNow ecosystem back out in Las Vegas again. Tons of breakout sessions. I'll say when I was learning the ServiceNow platform, going as a customer was the place where I learned the most, whether it was how to develop on the ServiceNow platform and some of the pre-conference trainings or the different labs that are offered throughout the week. Those are kind of my own personal favorite sessions, or just going around the expo floor, talking to our partners, our ServiceNow experts about the platform and getting all the excitement out there. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. If you're not already registered, it's getting close, but come talk to your ServiceNow teams. I'm sure we'd love to get you out there.
Yeah, I'm going to take that week off.
Good for you.
I'm going to take an extra nap or two because I'm just going to be so excited, so exhausted for Rich, because it is so much fun, so exciting, a lot of knowledge, but a lot of work goes behind the scenes. So
Yeah,
keep that in mind when you see Rich. Thank him for his time out there, for sure.
I could recommend to everyone on this call, wear comfortable shoes. It doesn't matter who you are at the conference. You will be walking quite a bit. Bring water and chapstick. It is a desert for folks that don't live in the desert. So I haven't looked at the weather. I'm sure it's getting hot out there. They're long days. They're fun days. Take advantage of it and network, meet a lot of cool people.
Yeah, the first time I went, I took fancy shoes because I was worried somebody would look at me funny. And then I think that they looked at me funny because I wore fancy shoes. So just definitely take tennis shoes, flats, you know, enjoy the time. Otherwise, you'll find yourself really early on in your hotel room, not enjoying what you went there for. So.
Awesome.
All right, Rich, is that it? I think
that brings us to questions. So yeah, we could wrap up the recording here.
Yeah, give me just 1 second. Let me stop the recording.